state's attorney comes on. He says, "Hey there, Ed, how's your family?" I said, "Okay." He said, "Now, Mr. Patrick, don't you just think there's some people who ought to die?" And I said, "Sir, we're all gonna die. I get that. That's not the question here. The question is, was his trial fair?"
Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Context Window. My guest today is former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick. Governor Patrick has had a storied career in government. He was the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights under President Clinton and was elected Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for 2 terms spanning 8 successful years. He presided over healthcare expansion and life sciences reform. He led us through the tragedy and the trauma of the Boston Marathon bombing, and he ran for president in 2020. Governor Patrick and I talk about impostor syndrome, how he overcame his fear of public speaking to become, in my opinion, a great orator, and the importance of and absence of moral leadership in politics today. He describes what it was like to save a man's life who was on death row and wrongfully convicted, and the frustration of not being able to save more lives. He also talks about leadership during a crisis and why Barack Obama backed him for governor even though he had no money or name recognition. This was a fun conversation, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. I'm eager to hear your feedback, so please email me at david@thecontextwindow.com. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the show. Governor Patrick.
Dean Deming.
So you arrived at Harvard in 1974. What did it feel like the first day you walked into Harvard Yard?
So I'd spent 4 years nearby
Yeah.
at Milton Academy. The first place I had heard the name Harvard.
Yeah.
I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and there was always an expectation that I had for long before Milton Academy that I would go to college one day.
Yeah.
Always encouraged to believe that.
Yeah.
From my family, but the apparatus for applying to college was unfamiliar.
Huh.
At Milton, it was the science, right?
Yeah,
There
of
was
course.
an office and a whole structure for that, and I applied to 5 schools. And I got into all 5, and 5, I think, is a small number compared to what people do today.
Only takes one, though.
Yeah, indeed. And I got the letter to the one I wanted to go to, and I called home, and I got my grandmother on the phone. And I said, "Gram, I'm going to college next year. I'm going to Harvard." And she starts yelling and screaming. She's calling various family members in this tenement we lived in. And then she paused, David, and she said, "Now, where is that anyway?" And I was devastated. It's like, how can you not?
I worked so hard for this.
Yeah, I worked so hard. And it was years. I've told this story around Harvard before. It was years before I understood that she appreciated that milestone differently and in some ways more deeply than I did.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't the prestige she was excited about, it was the opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
And in some ways, even then, before I quite understood it that way, coming in 1974, I got that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, I also got the fact that even the folks whose families' names were on the building, they were new and scared too.
Yeah, and it was a reminder of how far you come. So you grew up...
And to go.
And to go, exactly. So you grew up on the south side of Chicago.
Yes.
Raised by your mom in a basement apartment. As I have read, there were 2 beds for 3 people. So you were taking turns in the bed.
Yep.
And I remember an interview that I watched of you. You said that despite the fact that you were on welfare at periods of time, your mom refused to say you were poor.
My grandmother.
Your grandmother refused to say you were poor. Tell me about that.
We lived in this 2-bedroom tenement with my grandparents and various other relatives, and my mother and sister and I shared one of those beds.
Yeah.
And my grandparents were, refugees from the Jim Crow South. They'd
Yep.
come up in the 30s and raised my mother and uncle in Chicago. My parents split up when I was 4. My grandmother had a very sort of middle-class aspiration.
Yeah.
I think like most people did.
Yeah.
That one day we'd have our turn and that we should be ready. And some of that was about behavior and decorum and very old-fashioned kinds of ideas of, how you're supposed to behave. You're respectful to your elders. You look people in the eye.
Yeah.
When you shake hands, you stand. Very old-fashioned.
Yeah.
She'd also say, never describe yourself as poor. We are not poor. We are broke. She said, because broke is temporary.
Yeah.
And, when I think about it, broke for my family had been generational.
Yeah.
But still that sense that one day, we were we would ready ourselves and we get our break.
There's an opportunity. There's a forward direction of
Exactly,
travel.
exactly. You know, that story was never told as often as I'd like on the south side of Chicago in lots of communities, but it was a fundamentally American story, this idea that there was, if you worked really hard, you played by the rules, and the rules got better, that you'd have a chance. And I think that narrative has been up for grabs for a while now. It's deeply worrisome, and I think is, at the heart of a lot of the things I'm trying to work to improve.
So speaking of the how you get there, how did you get from the south side of Chicago as a middle schooler to Milton Academy?
There's a program still in existence today called A Better Chance.
Yeah.
I had a 7th grade English teacher in middle school who saw a flyer on a bulletin board, with the little strips of paper. You don't know what I'm talking about, but they, if you're interested, call this number.
I know what you're
Rip
talking
off
about.
the bottom, and she did. Mrs. Weisenberg, she tells me she has done that one time in her whole teaching career because she thought of me and thought that the choices available to me, in the general high school in our school district, or a vocational school, one on the south side, one on the north side. They taught things I now wish I knew, but I wanted to go to college, and at the time they weren't thought of as college preparatory. I actually wanted to be an architect.
Okay.
And I still want to be an architect.
Do you? When you grow up?
I'm going to be an architect one day. There were, I said vocational schools, but the technical schools had one on the north and one on the south side.
Yeah.
And the one on the south side was just not very well equipped.
Yeah.
I was graduating first in my class, and I was a good kid and all that. So she called, and others called the school on the north side to see if they'd take me, and they said absolutely no. I think they've been sued over that since, but those rules have changed. So it was she who said, I don't know much about this program. I don't know a lot about boarding schools. Have your mom come in. Let me introduce her to this program, and she can pursue it if she wants to. And so she did.
You graduated first in your class, as you mentioned, at a young age. You were precocious. You probably had a way with words even then, I'm guessing.
Not really.
But so my question
shy.
is, where do you think you would be if the teacher hadn't pulled that thing off? If you hadn't gone to ABC?
I'm so glad you asked that question because I'm deeply grateful to the A Better Chance program. I'm deeply grateful to Milton Academy and the adults there, teachers and parents of other students who looked out for me and paid attention, helped decode all that for me.
Yep.
But I often find, David, that when introduced or interviewed, people treat my life as having started at Milton Academy, and that's just not true because that dishonors the incredible teachers I had in those broken and overcrowded public schools, and the other adults in the neighborhood, because who, when I was a kid, you were under the jurisdiction of all of them, right?
Yeah.
So if you messed up down the street in front of Ms. Jones, she'd straighten you out and then call home, right? We had a real sense of community. And I had a 6th grade teacher in particular, Mrs. Quaintance, who taught us the greetings and the numbers in German. She took us to the first opera I'd ever seen. I didn't know what they were singing about. I still don't know, but I loved it. She took us to a new movie out at the time called The Sound of Music. And she used it to help explain modern European history, the rise of the Nazis, and the origins of the Second World War. She was the first person who made me imagine what it might be like to be a citizen of the world.
Yeah.
And she stayed in my life until the end of her life.
Yeah.
I had that relationship with a couple of teachers. She was there when I graduated from Harvard, when I graduated from Harvard Law School, when I was married, when I was sworn in at the Justice Department.
Yeah, wow.
She would have been present when I was sworn in as governor, but she had died by then. But my 3rd grade teacher was here. Yeah.
What I hear, that's interesting, Deval, because what I hear you saying is that, yes, the scholarship you got to Milton was a lucky break, a lottery ticket, but there were all these people before that who put you in a position to take advantage of that lucky break.
That's right. Yeah. The notion of having a chance, I was made to understood, was only as good as the good you made of that chance. And the way I imagine what my opportunities might be expanded with each of those each of those experiences at Milton Academy and certainly here at Harvard College and beyond.
So by all, at least external impressions, you thrived at Harvard. You were involved in the PBH. You were in the Hasty Pudding. You did a bunch of great things. You seem to have a great experience here. Do you think that Milton prepared you for that? Because you were coming from an environment very different than Harvard, but you had a little bit of preparation from Milton. So did you feel out of place here when you came here?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. And you, I remember I had this recurring dream.
Okay.
It was a daydream or a nightmare or whatever.
A bit of both.
A bit of both, because it was at night and during the day. Yeah. That in the middle of the night there would come a quiet knock on the door, and someone from admissions would come in and say, "Mr. Patrick, we're terribly sorry.
Yeah.
We made a terrible mistake, and if you would just quietly gather your things and follow us, so as not to upset your roommates, we will help you find your way home." And I would say I kind of half expected that knock on the door for maybe 4 years.
When did the dream stop? Did it ever stop?
There is, sometimes people refer to it as that impostor syndrome, something like that. I think at one level or another, one feels this when you're new to, especially to an environment where the supposition you're not supposed to be there. Yes. Some of that's race, some of that's background, some of that's just being new and afraid.
Yep.
And I think part of my own growing up is learning how to swallow that down and keep going. And to make friends, and I've made lifelong friends.
Yeah. So you went to Harvard Law School.
I did. Not right away, but eventually.
You also thrived at Harvard Law School. Among other honors, you won the award for Best Oralist in a moot court competition. That's correct?
You have done your homework.
I have, yes. So you clearly have a way with words. Anyone who's seen you speak knows that. Did you always have that, or did you develop it at Harvard Law School? When did you know you had it?
Believe it or not, I was very shy. I've always liked people. I was very shy. I had this amazing English teacher when I arrived at Milton Academy, A.O. Smith, who had gone to Harvard. And in fact, he was the one who introduced me to the idea of my coming to Harvard.
Huh.
He, too, was in my life for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
He loved language, and he conveyed that love of language in the classroom and beyond. And he was very insistent about choosing the right word and not being lazy in thinking about it. And that you didn't have to be elaborate language. In fact, the more direct it was, the more effective it was likely to be.
Yeah.
But that the language, the English language, is so broad and growing, and so rich that you didn't have to be lazy.
Yeah.
To get to just the thing you were trying to say. And I've been fascinated by that example. I've been interested in trying to do that. We had an exercise that was required of freshmen at Milton.
Okay.
Where you had to give something called a Warren Hall talk. And you worked on it in your English class, and it was a presentation and morning assembly to the lower classes. And you had to do it without notes. So you had to memorize it. I was a wreck. I was a wreck. And I remember, and I my opportunity was later in the semester, and you were supposed to practice this thing. And we'd gotten the time down right.
Yeah.
And he was standing in the back of this, what felt to me like a vast room.
I'm sure if you went back, it'd be much smaller, But
yeah,
your own mind was
probably,
vast.
that's right. But at the time, it felt like it was a stadium.
Yeah.
And I got up, and I got called up, and I felt like my feet were just sliding, trying to get to the front of the room. And I started my talk, and he put his ears up because I was speaking so softly he couldn't hear me.
Huh.
I got the rhythm. I started to speak up. I got the rhythm. I finished the talk. And, at this point, the school knew me as the quiet kid from Chicago.
Yeah.
And I got a standing ovation. And there were teachers who came up and said afterwards, I've never heard a talk like that. And I said, well, I've never given a talk like that.
Yeah, right.
I didn't know I could, but I think what was it Maya Angelou who said they won't always remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah.
And I think there's something in that lesson that I have been learning
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting thing for people to know, is that being a great orator is not something you're just born with. That you
I don't know that I'm a
practice.
great orator. I will say.
I said it, you didn't.
You're very kind. I met a guy once when I was in office at an event who said he was a speech teacher.
Yeah.
And he said, I read your speeches and I like them. He said, I have to tell you, I hate the sound of your voice.
Oh.
I said, man, okay. So I'm supposed to speak more in my register down here than I do.
That doesn't sound natural.
Well, it would. I tell reporters if they could just dub in the voice of James Earl Jones, I would be happy.
We'd all be happier if we could
Yeah,
have that.
indeed.
I want to talk to you about the Reverend Peter Gomes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So Reverend Peter Gomes was the minister of Memorial Church here at Harvard for
Yes,
many years
indeed.
and is a kind of legend on campus. So tell me about your relationship with him.
I met Peter when I was a freshman.
Yeah.
I went to Memorial Church the first time. I'd grown up in the church. I'm a person of faith. But
Yeah.
I went to the Memorial Church the first time, I think for the same reasons a lot of undergraduates go for the first time. I was just feeling lost
Yeah.
and overwhelmed. And first of all, Peter Gomes described himself accurately as an Afro-Saxon. This black man with this faintly British accent and these very kind of old school New England ways, and who was a brilliant scholar
Yeah.
and wicked funny. And he would blend all of this in his sermons. And I just remember being so moved and comforted and lifted by the sermon on that Sunday. I don't even remember what it was about, but I felt like he was talking to me.
Yeah.
So I went to one of his famous teas. He used to have these
Yeah.
teas. Who does tea in the U.S.? But anyway, he would have these teas, and he would get to know you, and he would ask really probing questions. When my wife and I moved back as grown-ups many years later, we became very close friends. And as I say, just incredibly interesting and erudite and warm and funny.
Yeah.
And insightful about people. He was encouraging of and became involved in my campaign.
Yes. He was a lifelong Republican,
He was
he
a
not?
lifelong Republican.
Yes.
He changed his registration to vote for
That's
me in
a
the
commitment.
primary, which was, it was just incredibly moving. And then he spoke at my inauguration, which just, I'm a crybaby.
I can tell he had a big influence
he
on
did.
you.
He did. I miss him.
I never knew him, and I was not at Harvard when he was here, but when I read about him, when I hear people like you talk about him, he seems like a kind of spiritual center of the university, somebody who could carry the emotional weight of things and set a tone. Do you think Harvard and other institutions are missing that presence in life, as maybe as the church has receded from public life more, or do you think, what is that role? That seems like an important role. Do we need more of that in public life?
What was so kind of reassuring, maybe, if not outright illustrative about Peter, is that he could live in the active world, the world of intrigue and meanness and competition and good and bad behavior all at once, and bring spiritual practice to bear without being sanctimonious. That it was completely in harmony. And I remember, that there are insights about just how radical the New Testament really is.
Yes.
Not was, but is.
Yes.
Was at the time, but still is.
Yeah.
Just how hard the expectations of Scripture are meant to be, and why, just how you bring that sensibility into everyday life without being sanctimonious, as I say. And I think that for a lot of liberal, I'm not meaning politically necessarily, but liberal thinking folks, that notion of living your faith feels a little discordant. And I loved that he lived it. He was bad. He wasn't always good. He could talk saucy about somebody with the best of them, but he understood, and he really reflected on, and then taught me how to think about what it means to live a life of love, including among those who disagree with you or you don't like and don't like you. And I think you ask, is it missing in the university. I think that I'm not close enough.
Yeah.
But I think that sometimes we shy from expressing a moral core, a purpose that is inspired by a higher calling than just the number of students graduated and the amount of money they give after they do. And I'm not saying that the latter is a description of Harvard. It's just I feel like that we're hungry for meaning.
Yeah.
Human beings are hungry for meaning, and in these times in particular, it feels like we are hungry for meaning. And so I am looking to more of our institutions, not just Harvard,
Yep.
to express that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the way I'd put it is, as faculty, we're researchers, scholars, empirical people grounded in data, grounded in knowledge, supposed to be dispassionate. And sometimes people want leadership. They want an emotional core to leadership. They want moral leadership. And we're not always comfortable with that side of the register because that's not what we do on a day-to-day basis.
They're not mutually exclusive.
No, not at all. Not at all.
That is a choice people make, but it's a false one.
I agree.
I remember being in, I think it was E.O. Wilson's class. E.O. Wilson was a famous biologist.
Yes, yeah.
And he was a brilliant teacher. And we were in this brand new building called the Science.
Okay.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And jammed in there, and he's talking about ants or something.
Yeah.
And he gets to a point where he said, there is no explanation for this particular behavior that makes any scientific sense.
Huh.
And he said, kind of as an aside, and that's the point where the mystery of faith may, in fact, fit.
Just a throwaway line.
Just a throwaway line. It's like, wow, did he really just say that? Is that okay? Wow.
So you graduated from law school here at Harvard, and you took a clerkship, and then you went to go work at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund.
I did.
Where you worked on voting rights cases, death penalty cases. Was there one that was most memorable to you or most impactful for you time there?
I would say that before I went to work at LDF, which was not my plan
Okay.
when I left law school, I was on my way to a big firm.
Yeah.
But life is what happens while you're making plans, right? And I got my dream job at LDF, and I did not want to be assigned to the death penalty
I see.
docket. I wanted to work on the voting rights docket, but the only opening they had was on the death penalty docket, and I was kind of, frankly, ambivalent about the death penalty. I didn't know much about it.
Yeah.
I got my first case out of Alabama, and the way the cases came were in a second stage of appeal, so they'd gone all the way through the state court, and there was a habeas petition, sometimes challenging the conviction itself, but more often challenging the appropriateness of the sentence.
Yeah.
And you get them on the eve, really, of an execution date, because they no longer can, the state did not support counsel for them. So I remember getting my first case on a weekend, and the execution date is set for Monday or Tuesday.
Wow.
And this guy calls and he says, I've signed up as the local attorney, but we need somebody who understands these cases, and can you help? And so we spend the rest of the weekend preparing the pleadings for the lower courts up to the Alabama Supreme Court. We file on Monday morning, and it goes through the stages of courts and up to the Alabama Supreme Court by the end of the day.
Wow.
On Monday. Just no. And you can't go to the federal court until you've done all that.
Yeah.
So we filed in the federal court, and I asked the court if we could have some discovery, just to gather some facts.
Yeah.
Because the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
And no decision. What happens at that time anyway is that the prisoner is moved to the out of their cell to a cell adjoining the execution space several hours before they get their last meal. They get their head shaved because when you're electrocuted, your hair often bursts into flames, and no one likes the smell. So all that had happened, and we still haven't gotten help yet. Finally, the court gives us a stay so he can hear the merits.
Yeah.
Old line federal judge in in Alabama, and he says, I'm going to have a hearing in the morning. I couldn't get there, so he was willing to do it over the phone, which was great.
Yeah.
And he opened the hearing. He said, now, counsel, he said, first of all, who's representing the petitioner? And I said, Deval Patrick from New York, NAACP Legal Defense Fund. He said, all right then, Mr. Patrick, hold on. Who's representing the state? And state's attorney comes on. He says, hey there, Ed, how's your family? I said, okay. He said, now, Mr. Patrick, don't you just think there's some people who ought to die? And I said, sir, we're all going to die. I get that. That's not the question here. The question is, was his trial fair? And I explained what it is we were looking for. Yeah. All that material was in the prosecutor's file. He said, all right, I'll give you this much time. We got access to the file. Turns out there's a sworn statement in the prosecutor's file positively identifying someone else as the killer. And the state's attorney, to his great credit, he went on to be a federal judge, said, yeah, this isn't right. It's a violation of the Constitution, either the adequacy of counsel or withholding, the withholding of the information. One or the other happened, and so he's got it. So not only was his sentence vacated, but his conviction was vacated. This guy was 90 minutes from being killed. What I saw is that this happens over and over and over again. I'm not saying every prosecution is flawed in that way, but the carelessness of the criminal justice system is something we really have to grapple with. So that was highly impactful.
Can I ask you? So you saved that man's life, but the fact that you and the team saved that man's life, but the fact that that happened relatively early in your tenure suggests for every one time you interjected at the right moment, there were 5 or 6 others. That were wrongful. So does that make you feel good about the fact that you were able to intervene, or sad that you can't intervene with the other cases, or both?
Both, really. And it has made me deeply respect the folks who work on things like the Innocence Project or my friend and early co-counsel Brian Stevenson. I would say there's certain things that government just does not do well. Yeah. Interestingly, that's sort of how I arrive at my position on choice as well. I just don't think there's certain decisions that are just too fraught for institutions to do routinely well, but they're highly consequential. Yeah. I also, in a voting rights case, sued then Governor Bill Clinton, and which is how I got to know him. And that then ended up, because he and I worked out the settlement together, we ended up, when he became president.
Oh, that's interesting. Because then a decade later, he asked you to be the U.S. Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights Division.
Correct. I was his third choice, but he got to me. Yes, indeed.
So you were, that job, so you got to know Bill Clinton that way, maybe some other ways, but that job is basically, as I understand it, the senior official on the issue of civil rights in the country. So you are basically in charge of enforcement of civil rights at DOJ.
Right. That's right.
And
when the Civil Rights Division was in the civil rights business, yes. Thank you.
But you were, I think, you were not even 40 years old.
Right.
Did you think you were going to get the job? I mean, you said you were the third choice.
Yeah, no, I didn't.
Were you surprised when you got the call?
The lead counsel in the case at LDF was the great Lonnie Guinier, who was ultimately a professor at Harvard Law School. Yeah. But just an ingenious lawyer, just incredible. Yeah. And she knew President Clinton and Mrs. Clinton from law school at Yale. Okay. So they were friends. When Bill Clinton was elected president the first time, all of us expected and hoped that Lonnie would be named head of the Civil Rights Division, and the president did in fact nominate her, and her nomination was withdrawn many months later after. That's a whole other story. Deeply disappointing. Yeah. And then he tried somebody else, and that didn't work out. And so he got around to me. Yeah. And he got around to me because of a serendipitous series of events that involved Ted Kennedy and Janet Reno, and one thing led to anher. So anyway.
Either way, you were the man for the moment. Was that job what you expected?
And then some.
Yeah.
And then some. It was a ball. I mean, we had it was hard. Yeah. And it was much, much more political
Yeah.
than I expected. Not because we were trying to make it so, but because civil rights is treated that way often.
Yeah.
And we had, all the agita around affirmative action at the time.
Yeah.
And the president was very involved in that. And indeed, I'd say for me, the job was particularly challenging and exciting because the president himself was interested in the topic matter, in the subject matter, and the attorney general was a fantastic boss. She didn't have any problem with the president being in touch with me directly, as long as I kept her in the loop. So you'd get a call in the middle of the night because he was a night owl.
Yeah.
Oh, Bill.
So you went to law school. You worked at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Then you became partner at a Boston law firm.
Yep.
Then you went to go work at DOJ. Yep. Then you went to go work as, I think, corporate counsel at Texaco.
I came back to Boston. And into private practice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I went to work for a company.
And then you ran for governor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is what some people would call, I think, well, you tell me, this is what some people would call the revolving door. So that has a negative connotation. But if you're willing, I want you to defend it. What do you think you learned from those experiences going back and forth?
Well, a couple of things. It's so interesting, revolving door. Let's see. I was 3 years at DOJ. I came out and practiced in 3 different places for a decade.
Yeah.
And then I ran for elective office. The first time I ever ran didn't feel like a revolving door.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
I think that it's a couple things. There are certain things that are the same or similar as between, a large public bureaucracy and a large private bureaucracy.
Yep.
Right? There are layers of decision making. You can issue all the edicts from the top you want in the public or the private sector. If you don't win middle management, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
One of the things that is missing from much of the leadership I see is some humility about the scope and the demand of the job. The other that had a big influence on how I thought about taking the chance on running for governor is that we have an awful lot of leaders, public and private, who want to have these jobs but not do them. Right? They want to be in the seat and accumulate, if you will, the political capital. But if you want to do something, you got to spend the political capital, and that's high risk. So I wanted to see if folks were missing that as much as I was, and if I could bring that different kind of leadership in the public sphere as well. But no, I didn't think of it as a revolving.
Well, what I hear you saying, and at least how I would defend it, is you're trying to solve public problems, just sometimes you're solving them from the public sector and sometimes you're solving them from the private sector.
Well, here's another insight. When it comes to the big challenges that face humankind today, the climate crisis or chronic poverty, take, a handful of them, they're not going to be solved by one sector on its own. It's going to take collaboration. And I think the more practice you can get at collaborative problem solving, the better off we're going to be, the better off and the better prepared our leaders will be.
So you ran for governor in 2006. Mm-hmm. Did you think you would win?
I did. Nobody else did. Really, nobody else. I remember I had an old friend who had just won a seat in the U.S. Senate. And I went to see him, and I'd helped as I could. And I went to see him, and I said, Barack, I'm going to run for governor. And he said, and he's still moving into his basement office there in the Senate. He leaned back, he said, huh.
Not a ringing endorsement.
He said, you got any money? I said, nope. He said, you got any people? I said, nope. He said, what's your name recognition? I said, I don't know. 2%, maybe 3% on the days we're bragging. He said, He said, well, I'm in. What do you need me to do? And, we had a few, it's amazing what I learned in that experience. I learned that in Massachusetts, the political dynamic is not actually Democrat-Republican, it's insider-outsider. And that most people feel like outsiders. Frankly, I think this is a national phenomenon.
I agree.
That a lot of folks who are career political folks aren't processing.
Yep.
I learned that there is power in just showing up in places where you're not expecting to. with your own set of ideas, but also open to people's better ideas and making that plain. I learned that there was an appetite still for an ambitious agenda, that we are constantly fighting our own cynicism and the way it limits us or protects us from disappointment, that people wanted to be invited to put their cynicism down. I learned that.
They want to be inspired.
Yeah, and I learned the kind of energy you get. It's not so much being with crowds. I don't actually like crowds. I much prefer, I don't need to have every conversation filmed, but I do like interaction with people, and you learn stuff. And when you're out running that kind of grassroots campaign, you're trying to govern in that way, I'd see people all the time, often surprised. They'd give a double take, which I attributed in the first instance to the fact that I'm taller on TV. And then you could see them working out what to say. And it was rarely a criticism. It was more often than not, by a long shot, some tiny, often deeply intimate insight into their lives. And if you're listening, you start to get a sense of what the consensus experience is. And it affects how you think about policy, what that policy ought to be, how it touches people, and how to make sure it touches people, stuff like that, which is incredible gifts, I thought.
So you became the first black governor of Massachusetts.
Is that right?
Yes, it is. And the second overall since Reconstruction. Mm-hmm. I imagine that people have said that as part of a bio introducing you many, many times. How does that make you feel? Does it make you feel proud? Does it make you feel like, is it a burden? How does it hit you?
Well, first of all, I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
When people introduce you when you're in public life, there's this tendency to exaggerate. The best introduction I ever had was from Doug Wilder, who was the first black governor elected after Reconstruction. He was the governor of Virginia. And he talked about people making a fuss about him being first. He said, being first doesn't mean a thing unless there's a second. And that kind of reminder about the things you're supposed to represent, it's not about you. It's what you enable others to imagine, what you help others to do. On the other hand, on the burden side, I wasn't trying to be the governor of the black people in the same way I wasn't trying to be governor of the Democrats. I want to be heard. I'm not saying I didn't care about or want to serve black people. That is not what I'm saying.
Not only.
Exactly. And I wanted to be thought of as everybody's governor, whether you voted for me or not, whether you were of my tribe, as they say, or not. And I tried to behave that way.
Yeah. And you had 2 successful terms. From my point of view.
Not every day, but most, I feel really good about it.
What's one thing that you accomplished as governor that most people don't know about or wouldn't be part of the bio, but you're really proud of?
Wow. That list is long. We got to 98% coverage, healthcare coverage, before Obamacare. Yeah. And I will say, even when the website failed, we were trying to integrate Obamacare, we went from 98 to 98.5% while the website was down, right? People understood on our team and in the general public what this was, and it wasn't about a website. We climbed out of recession to a 25-year employment high. I'm really proud of that, and the Life Sciences Initiative was a big part of that, as was the emphasis on clean and alternative energy. But the thing that I think was the most visible in some ways, but not the thing that's associated necessarily with me or me alone or me primarily, was the response to and the recovery from the marathon bombing.
I want to ask you about that.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that is thought of as a Boston-wide, a community or Commonwealth-wide thing, and not me, because that was how we successfully responded to and recovered from the marathon bombing.
So, I know it wasn't just you, but it is associated with your governorship, in part because you were the voice in the community. I mean, I remember, so my children were very young, and I lived in Cambridge near where the bombers were on the loose. As a matter of fact, my house was on Norfolk Street, which is where they grew up.
Yeah.
And so we were on lockdown for 2 days, and I remember seeing you on television before we knew each other. And that sticks in people's minds. So do you feel like, and also you were the governor during the financial crisis in 2008. So do you feel like these crisis moments are what end up defining a leader more than anything they want to do?
They can. They can, but I wasn't. I think one of the ways I have tried to lead is to encourage the best from my team and beyond.
Yeah.
And in order for them to give me their best and their most candid, their most creative, their most daring, I think I have to give them credit when things go well and give them cover when things do not.
Yeah.
So, this wasn't our first crisis. This may have been our most consequential or most visible, but it wasn't our first crisis. We'd had practice, not just the state team, but with the city, with regional crisis response folks. We'd had practice. They knew I was going to be asking a lot of questions, and that we were going to come together with the best answer. And when there was a sense of a decision having to be made, I would make it. So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I wasn't in charge of the criminal investigation, right? Other people had that role, including the Boston City Police. It was a collaborative effort. The FBI was in charge of it. We identified 2 gauzy photographs on the second day, right, from all these images being captured. I was asked, is it okay if we make these public?
Yeah.
That's not my call. But I said, no way. And they said, well, why? This will help. I said, first of all I see are 2 swarthy guys. I was here during the Charles Stewart experience. I get into that when people, law enforcement turned Roxbury and Dorchester upside down looking for a black guy in a hoodie when the perpetrator was the white husband of the woman who and unborn baby who were victims.
Yeah.
None of that. We got to be clear. The next day, we had clear images. Turns out they were different than the gauzy ones, but we had clear images. And the president was still here, and I was shown these images, and they said, we'd like to make these public. I said, you can, but you have to wait until Air Force One is wheels up, because we had all this law enforcement that was paying attention to the security of the presidential visit, and also because everything will speed up as soon as and it did.
It did.
But those are decisions that it wasn't my jurisdiction to make, but they came to me because we had this kind of understanding that if there was something where there was going to be real consequence, they were going to need cover.
Yeah, you were going to own it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you ran for president in 2020.
For 15 minutes.
Did you think you were going to win? That was when you started.
I think if we had started in 2018, which is when we planned to do.
That was going to be my question. How long in advance did you plan?
Yeah, no, we had a plan, and again, not because I always wanted to be president, but because, again, I was feeling like we have a moment here. I think we're still in it, where the public is mainly feeling like they aren't seen and heard, and the appetite for some ambitious changes is there.
Yes.
But we're not going to get it from the establishment. And I do respect to everybody, but we're just unlikely to get it. And had a lot of encouragement from President Obama and others, and we developed a plan. We had a kickoff date.
Yeah.
And about 10 days before my wife Diane was diagnosed with uterine cancer, she's fine. She's great. They got it early, surgery and a little radiation, but we didn't know that then.
Yeah.
And it's a lot to step out and try to do with that kind of uncertainty.
Yeah, it's a lot to do when nothing is going on in your life.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, okay, that cycle's not for me.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be. And then bunches of my friends got in the field. It was a great big, broad field. And I will say some of the people I admired who were in it just got kind of wacky. I mean,
It did.
People started to turn into cartoon versions of themselves, and all to get attention. And I understand, but there's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
And I was still getting encouragement to jump in because nobody had voted. But the fact that nobody had voted didn't mean that a lot of the folks who were, had been lined up to help me had already joined other campaigns and all that stuff. So that's hard to organize quickly.
Yeah. I was interested in how you compare those moments. So when you decided to run for governor and when you decided to run for president, how the prep happens and then how you experience it. Like, did you think you learned anything from your presidential run, even though, as you said, it was short and you had this family history? Like, did you learn anything about that preparation and what it's like to run a political campaign now versus, 15 years ago or anything?
Well, I learned a lot about the kind of inner workings of, on the Democratic side anyway, of getting delegates, and a lot of it's not pretty. No, I'm not kidding. It's not. It's built to exclude, I would say, which is self-defeating in my view.
Yeah.
Had I gotten in earlier, I think we could have figured out ways through and around, just as we did when I ran for governor. I ran for governor for 18 months or something like that, and I did only that.
Yeah.
So by the time, and mostly people didn't pay attention. I remember feeling so hurt that we were doing all this work and we couldn't get any attention from anybody. It turns out that was a blessing.
Yeah, it paid off when you had to govern too.
Well, yeah. So I think that running for president, it's not just that it's a bigger footprint and all that, and it costs more money than it should.
Yeah.
It's that the workaround, if you want to run a non-traditional campaign, takes time.
Yeah.
I love New Hampshire, I love Iowa, I love South Carolina, but nobody goes to Mississippi. Nobody.
Yeah.
No Democrat does anyway. Nobody goes to Utah or something like that, and there's citizens in all those places whom you wish to serve. So go learn about them. Let them learn about you. It takes time.
Yeah, it does. You returned to Harvard in 2022 as a professor at the Kennedy School. That's where we met.
Indeed.
What was faculty life like? Was it what you expected?
It's tough. There's a lot of work. The Kennedy School was amazing.
Probably not as hard as being governor, by the way. But
It's just a different kind of hard. And as governor, I had a lot of support. This was different. I liked my colleagues. I didn't see much of them because everybody's doing their own thing and doing their own research and counseling their own students. You were there. I adored you, but I didn't get to see much of you while you were there because it's just, everybody's pulled in.
Busy and
Everybody's busy. I learned a ton in the classroom. It was wicked hard to get into the classroom. To get ready and feel prepared, but I just learned a ton from the students and how they were thinking and how they interacted. And I think trying to set some ground rules on how they, I always said to them, look, I want you to say anything in this class that is respectful and informed. But let's try talking to each other instead of about each other. Because I had heard all these terrible things about how folks are tweeting controversy. You step out in the hall after the class and it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
I hated, and I still hate, the grading.
Yeah.
And I think when I had the second or third appeal of an A-, I thought, no, I'm not, no.
You've been affiliated with Harvard for more than 50 years now. How has Harvard changed in the time since you've known it?
I think when I first came, let me see, I think women had been in the river houses for maybe a year, maybe two.
Yeah.
Black people are not new to Harvard, but in the numbers and the intentionality about that was a newer thing.
Yeah.
And there was occasional ambivalence about that, and there is ambivalence about that today, and they come from different sources.
Yeah.
But the value of being in company with people who are not the same, ideologically, ethnically, and geographically, and all the rest, the value of that, you cannot bottle it. It's just, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And if you wait a beat or two and you kind of let people emerge from the box that you've put them in, or they let you emerge from the box they've put you in, that's where the richness comes from. I think Harvard's still dedicated to that. I want it to be. And it has the position and the resources to be that, and that is a huge contribution to the society and to leadership in the society, I believe.
Last question for you, Deval.
Yeah.
We are approaching the 250th birthday of the country. And as you know, Harvard's history is deeply intertwined with the history of America. So my question for you is Harvard a force for good in this country? And more importantly, how can it be better?
Well, I see our time is up. Look, Harvard has been around a lot longer than the United States was the United States.
It has.
More than a century longer, I believe. And it has not just produced presidents, but it's produced a sense of service and a tradition of service in its graduates. And I'm not just talking about elective service in elective office. I mean service in a variety of different leadership and citizenship roles. That's important. That is an example, not to revere, but to constantly refresh. It's a story to tell. It's an expectation to convey to current students about their own responsibility to themselves and their generational responsibility to those who come behind. I think Harvard has done that well at times in its past. I think it can always improve that and center it, frankly, in the mission. You know, we have a lot of repair work to do in the country. And it's not just programs and institutions and all that. We have repair work to do in our sense of common cause and our willingness to imagine a common good and to work for that. So I think you get that in a place that encourages that you set your cynicism down and think about that as a part of your personal responsibility.
Governor Patrick, Deval, thank you so much for
Good to
being
be
here.
with you, David. Thank you.